Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Laura. I'm from Synergy Network, and co-hosting with me today is Elisa. Here's Elisa. Hi. Yeah, we're just so glad to that you're joining us this evening. So we've got some amazing young people that you'll be getting to know. Elisa, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Elisa. Nice to see everybody tonight and our panelists as well. Really looking forward to the conversation, just seeing successful young people. We need hope, we need some light, and we need some inspiration. So I'm a researcher and a resource developer, working with churches and parachurch organizations. And most of my work is focused on decolonization, but beyond the theory, the action, how it lands on the streets in church life and kind of everyday Christian living. So making the theory into practical reality is what I try to do. And my research is looking at the influence of Bible-based Black religions, alternative ones to Christianity, and the influences on the fringes of the Black British church. So the question is, why Black young people leaving the church, and what religions are they joining? That's kind of my research interest and remit. And so I just combine those together to help and contribute to making the church a slightly better place. That's what we try to do.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, a little bit about Synergy Network. We are a group of, we bring churches together from across the country and organisations to try and tackle serious youth violence by building connections between people who are already doing great work and ensuring that we're all coming together to make the work towards ending serious youth violence happen quicker. So that's what we're doing. Brilliant. Well, Elisa, do you want to introduce some of the panel members?
Yes, sure. So tonight I'm going to be introducing, we'll have Dion Marie. She'll be joining us as soon as she can. She's a youth worker based in South London and junior leader of her local Baptist church. We have Gabriel, a hardworking student excelling in leadership positions within the community, a published author and founder of mentorship initiative, the Keys Project. And we also have Hannah. Hannah studied criminology at Durham before moving to London to work for Spear, which is a charity that supports young people who have faced barriers to getting into work or education and helps them find the next steps. Aside from work, Hannah has set up an education hub on how to be anti-racist for her church. Hannah feels called to set up a charity to help the perpetrators of modern slavery find Jesus, to stop the cycle of offending repeating. She enjoys baking, hosting people for meals, and the odd Joe Wicks workout. It's a woman after my own heart.
Wonderful. And I will introduce some of the other amazing young people we've got here today. So I'm going to be introducing Natasha. Natasha is a 22-year-old student and co-founder of All Black Lives UK, who helped to mobilise their nationwide Black Lives Matter protests for George Floyd. She's currently working with the organisation and others, such as Christian Aid, to continue pushing Black liberation and equality in the youth community. And then I'd also love to introduce Mark Anthony. Mark Anthony is a recent graduate from the University of Bristol with a bachelor's degree in law. While at university, he was elected as Afro-Caribbean Society Secretary. During his tenure, the Society was awarded Bristol Student Union's Society of the Year Award, as well as Event of the Year, their cultural showcase. Mark Anthony also has experience mentoring aspiring Black law students in year 12 and 13 and helping them in the application process to top UK universities. So that's our group today. As you can hear, amazing group. So we're looking forward to asking them some tricky questions and all learning from them. So let's, Elisa, I think the first question is from you.
Yes, so I'm going to head it off. We're getting right in there. So this is for Gabriel and Natasha. So the first question is, how did you respond to the Black Lives Matter protests last year? And what are you doing now on this issue? Or is there any kind of continual response with what you do in your own lives?
Yes, and also thank you for a very illustrious introduction. So I would say for the Black Lives Matter movement, it was very uncomfortable for all of us. And obviously it did come from a place of, it wasn't positive to begin with. So I feel like that's for me where it started from. It was kind of feeling very uncomfortable. And I think when you feel uncomfortable is kind of about how do you make yourself feel better? For me, that was through expression, that was through writing. So on my LinkedIn, I did, put a little, I wouldn't even call it an article. I'd say just a short paragraph of my feelings and what we should actually do to better ourselves as Black people in the world. I truly believe in self-determinism and making sure that we ourselves can do things to act and make the world a better place for us. So yeah, expression and thinking about inclusivity, which is part of what I believe to be self-determinism, and making actual change within our community, making sure that young people get the skills necessary to go to where they need to in life, and that they're spoken to, that they have the support necessary, which is partially why I created the Keys project, my mentorship initiative.
And would you like to tell us just a little bit about this Keys mentorship?
Yes, so the key, or the name Key stands for knowledge elevates your skill set, and is inspired by one of the main characters of my published novel, The Escape. I even have a copy here.
That's right.
Yes, The Escape, is Tale of Change and Evolution. But yeah, it's essentially linking young people to positive mentors that can give them the skills necessary to elevate in life.
Wonderful. Natasha.
So obviously my route was a bit different. I just remember the first day when obviously George Floyd was murdered, and I think because of COVID and lockdown, nobody really wanted to do protests, but I think because I'm very much a person who uses my voice, so I put a video on Instagram, and I was kind of this, I didn't know how to word it, what to say, but I knew that something needed to be done. And also my other co-founders, Tyreek and Ima, both felt that as well. So we kind of just came together and did 10 weeks of protesting in London. And obviously that was a very, a time that changed a lot of things. If we hadn't have done that, would we be in this position now? Obviously I wouldn't be sat on this panel today. So we made an organization from that, and at the moment, a lot of people have been trying to recover from the past year, because obviously it has been, like you said, really uncomfortable, just not just as a Black person, but just being in society. We're seeing a lot of things escalate and get a lot more tension. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we, as an organization, are 100%, so that we can give 100% and make sure that everybody's getting the same message. So kind of at the moment, we're just working with, other organizations such as Christian Aid, but also doing, other topics such as climate change, which does also disproportionately affect the Black community or Black and ethnic minority communities. So it's just trying to tie everything back to Black liberation, but also making sure you are supporting, other marginalized groups within, that situation. So that's kind of what we've been doing for the last, couple of months.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So next question is from me. I'm going to be asking Hannah to start with. What are the challenges and pressures that you think young people are facing today?
Yeah, I think there are quite a range of different things that young people are facing. I think unemployment, huge one. I work for a charity that helps young people who are 16 to 24 who've faced barriers of getting into employment or education. And actually, when you look at the stats from the past 18 months, 2/3 of people that were made unemployed during the pandemic were in that age range. We're facing as young people, whether you're a graduate or not, facing huge issues with getting into work. And actually that just sets you back massively, because you don't have money, you don't have, you might have that desire to get somewhere, but actually if you can't get to that place and employment's a good step in the wrong, then how do you do that? And actually, when it comes to things like uni, I'm seeing increasingly my friends who graduated from Durham alongside getting, first class degrees, they're not getting into roles because there's too much demand. And actually they're getting roles that are sort of in cafes or in shops. And actually that means that some of the young people I work with who aren't able to go to uni, that means that their roles, they can't get those sorts of roles. So it's just sort of that's sort of a cycle, and that's a real challenge, and that sort of runs onto finances. I mean, I think as young people, there's that, you see a lot in culture of, you know, go out at the weekends, be able to go out for drinks with your friends and go on those weekends away and go on holiday, but also you need to save because at some point you might want to own a house. But how to do that when you've got to spend, you know, most of your salary a month on rent? Those kind of things, huge pressure. And then slightly separately, I think I was thinking about relationships. I think in the Christian circles, I think there's a lot of pressure in the church to, you know, get in a relationship, you need to find that person, all that kind of stuff, which leads to chronic dating, impact on your mental health, all those kinds of things. It just, everything is sort of linked together. But yeah, those are some of the things that people around me and I can relate to having struggled with.
How do you, I'm just throwing another question there, but how do you think the church could help young people? So the two things that you said were the pressure to be in relationships and the dating pressures, and then the other one was the lack of opportunities for work. Does anything come to mind about how a church could help young people in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the organisation I work for is Christian. You know, I think Spirit, what we do, I know I'm biased, but you know, if it does help people, it does educate people. I guess even touching on what people have mentioned here about like sort of setting up mentoring schemes, I feel like if young people who are struggling with employment were able to talk to older generations about their journey, they would realise that it's not abnormal that you struggle to get into work, and that actually, you know, it's not just you find your dream job the first time you apply for a role, you never face rejection, you have to have resilience. I think that knowledge would encourage people to keep going. And then in terms of relationships, I just think the church needs to talk about it a lot more, like a lot more. Like, why not have more seminars on it? I mean, I think about the fact that, I don't know, I'm sure people here can relate to the youth club evening or whatever it is. We have the girls go one side and the boys go the other side, and you have that talk, and that's it for the year. And then it comes back the next year, and then suddenly you go off and you're an adult, and then there's the pressure to get married, and that's it. That's all I ever found from church. And I think if we talked about it more, if we didn't just talk about sex, we spoke about what does it look like to love? What does it look like to date in a healthy way? What just actually open up the conversation? Otherwise, people are making mistakes by struggling to work out what's the right thing to do. I made mistakes, and I didn't know the right way. I only knew what was right for me once I've made those mistakes. So I think if we had those conversations more, mentors again, I think that'd make a big difference.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I'm going to throw the question across to Natasha as well. So Natasha, what do you think the challenges and pressures are facing a young person today? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
I think especially for our generation, we've kind of seen the previous generations kind of like be able to achieve maybe less and less, and now it's for us, and we're trying to break out of like not being able to achieve less, but all the odds are kind of stacked against us. So I think a lot of young people are trying very hard to like not live in reality but also live in reality, if that makes sense. Like you've got to try and find yourself, but also, like you said, find a job and find a house and find a person that you want to, you know, settle down with for the rest of your life. And you know, not everybody is as privileged. Like I still live at home, I don't have to pay rent, so that's, you know, two things that I'm already not worried about. But for a lot of other young people, they can't stay in their home situations. A lot of people aren't from, you know, households that might be accepting of the way that they want to live their life, so they have to go off and, you know, find another family or find other people that they can feel would be a community for them. And I think community is really, really a massive thing for young people. I think we've kind of lost our sense of community, like obviously losing COVID, like people lost some of their best years, you know, 18, 19, 21, 22, we've had those years inside, and those are the years that you're, you know, culminating and making the basis of, you know, the friendships that you're going to take for the rest of your life. And I think when you don't have, you know, that sense of actual, you know, friendship and making connections with people, it's harder. Like, you know, like was said before, like to have relationships, to go into dating, you don't have that, you know, sense of what is a connection that I'm actually looking for. You're kind of just trying to figure it out. And I think having all of those issues, you know, on top of like having a, like, you know, a global warming crisis, on top of, you know, having COVID, on top of, you know, market crashing and all those other things that we all have to deal with as humans, you know, particularly our generation are very much having a hard time, I think, just rationalizing everything and trying, like, who's going to help us? There's no sort of like handouts anymore. It's all kind of being taken away. So I think definitely we need to, as just a collection of young people, also support each other, because everybody's going through different sections of basically the same race. You know, we might be behind, we might be in front, but as long as, you know, trying to find the middle path for everyone will probably be the best way. But it's really difficult. Obviously, not everybody knows where they can go. And obviously, like, this conversation is about the church, and I think the church has a really good, you know, reach to be able to get to a lot of young people, and it's about, you know, marketing that in a way that young people are going to be able to feel safe, because I feel like there's such a market for people that don't have that community that can be taken into the church, and then from there it's like building on top of that. So yeah, it's very difficult. I think we're in a very difficult period, but being around like-minded people, like, makes it easier to kind of like get through that period. But I think we definitely need help. There needs to be, you know, help, and I think because there's none of that, we can't help ourselves.
You mentioned before how you used social media to mobilise the Black Lives Matter protests. So social media, I just wanted to ask you a question about social media, but just to start with, that social media can be used really positively, can't it?
Yeah.
But do you think that social media is also causing some kind of feelings of isolation, or do you think it's managing to build community? How do you find it for yourself and your friends?
I think social media is really difficult. It kind of depends who's navigating it. Like, I have had maybe 10 Twitter accounts, and that was just because like for like the last time I've been on Twitter, like, I've been defending myself against racists. So like in that kind of situation, you feel isolated because that's a whole platform that is like not understanding where you're coming from as a person. So maybe like personal things like that people might not understand, but also it is a really good way to like get information quickly and understand things quickly. And like, I feel like I'm always learning stuff on different forms of social media, because like that's an easy way to get your point across, but also it's an easy way to spread hate. It's an easy way to spread misinformation. It's an easy way to make people pick sides and get people to, you know, fight against each other or fight amongst each other, which is like the whole deal anyway. They'd rather us be fighting each other fighting against the system. But that's just all kind of stuff that you have to work out like by yourself, and you can't force other people to work it out before they're ready to do that. And I think that's kind of a frustrating thing as well, you know, when you kind of figure it out and you're like, okay, I get it, and now it makes sense and it's easy for me, you kind of think that everybody else is going to get it in exactly the same way. And I think that's probably where the disconnect is, because there's not those in-person conversations where things that are misunderstood can be ironed out and like be, you know, regurgitated in a sense. Social media, I think is very black and white and doesn't allow the space for that to happen. So, you know, as the world opens up, obviously, hopefully, people will want to have more kind of like in-face discussions, but there needs to be those platforms to be able to do that. There needs to be those events that are there to do that, so we can kind of, you know, use social media in a good way, but also realize that we have, you know, these in-person sessions that we can talk about it. It's like, I saw you say that last week, I don't really understand, can you please explain? And then it kind of goes like that. So I think that would be the best way to kind of use social media. Like it's a very difficult it's a very difficult media. Like, medium is like difficult anyway. People can manipulate media in whatever way they want. You just have to try and be smart about it. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you. Great. So next question is coming over to Hannah again, so be prepared. For you, what is the most important issue facing society? So there are a few things that come to mind: the climate emergency, COVID, Black Lives Matter, asylum crisis. What comes to your mind?
Yeah, I think I know that we still use the phrase climate change, but I think even the fact that the phrase has almost shifted to being like climate crisis, climate emergency, I think that is signifying the shift in how massive it is. Now, I was thinking, I've been thinking a bit over the past few weeks actually about, when you hear stats and then you actually can't really remember it, but then in your head it's kind of the world's getting hotter, but I'm not too sure really what that means or that kind of stuff. So I was looking into it a little bit, and the reality of it is absolutely frightening. And it's so much more than me now using like a shampoo bar or trying to use less plastic. Actually, we just really need to do something about it now. I was looking into it, and some stats that were jumping out to me were things like, that there hasn't been the best link between COVID-19 and climate emergency. But we think about illnesses, things like the dengue fever, by 2050, because of climate change, that could be a major disease across the whole of the Southern Hemisphere. So that could be a disease that is rampant in the US, in Mexico, in China, in Japan, in Australia. Like, that disease hospitalizes people. Like, that alone is a scary fact, that could be an everyday commonality, like COVID's been for the past year. That could be taking people into hospital so regularly. And that kind of just like jumped out to me as being something. But if I think about climate change and climate emergency, it's displacing people. So it's causing a further refugee crisis. And I think even thinking about things like racism, if you've got loads of people displaced and forced into new areas and new communities in a place where maybe there was an existing community and then they come into it, actually that's going to could cause fraught relationships, that could cause more discrimination, not just racism, but sexism. But if you think about it, the people don't have the time to create those relationships. Like, you can snap much quicker. So for me, I think, I know there's a lot that is going on, but I'd say the fact that it's shifted from being change to an emergency and to crisis just shows that, this isn't just something that we see in companies making that carbon neutral promise and we're going to be like this for the Paris Agreement. It's actually like, if we fundamentally don't move, our planet is going to be in an awful state. It is already, but we really, really need to do things about it.
And do you feel like your church and the church is talking enough about these issues?
That's a good question. Absolutely not. I actually don't think, my church is fantastic, but I don't think I've heard them really mention the climate emergency that much. Even down to things like hospitality after the service. Like, how much are we chucking away? Are we thinking about what we're buying? I'm sure everyone's seen those little pots of snacks you can get in like Tesco's, 2 for £3, just like, like 15 millionaire slice. They come in plastic things. That's such a classic post-church hospitality snack, but that's causing landfill. That's not good for our environment. But I think, and that's on a small scale, but I think the church in general needs to be doing significantly more. I mean, church buildings are huge and they're also really old, which means they're not always the most energy efficient. And that's not to say that, don't have a church running, but it's to say we need to think about these things. The fact that we've seen it when the church doors have been shut and we want to keep them open now that they could be open again, but we've got to be clever about the way we use our resources. And I think I would love for me to be able to chat to my non-Christian friends and stand there proud as a Christian to say that my church and as Christians we were doing something major about climate change. But at the moment, I can't truthfully say that because I don't think we are, and we need to. I'd love for us to be dominating in our change. I'd love for us to be leading it, but I don't think at the moment. Not sure we are.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I'm going to send the same question across to Mark Anthony. So are you still there? I'm sure he's still there. Yes, he is. There, I can see him. Thank you. So for you, what is the most important issue facing society?
Yeah, I think you'll find it really hard to disagree with it being the climate emergency, just because it's something that affects the whole globe in that sense, and it also sort of leads to other issues. So as Hannah mentioned about you have environmental refugees because of rising sea levels. That will cause them to be displaced as they move to different areas, and that will create a new crisis with refugees, for example. Then you also have the issue of poverty and struggling to provide food, and it becomes harder to grow food due to like extreme weather events, too much flooding, heat waves, and I think that's really what's a big issue about it. I think it's really hard to really argue anything else, to be honest.
Yes, thank you. And do you feel like your church is talking enough about it?
Not really. I think with COVID-19 and just how prominent it's been, it's not really left much room for discussion about anything else, because we're just simply focusing on the short term right now, and it's not really giving a chance to focus on the long term. So yeah, I don't think the church is really discussing that right now, and especially with the demographic of my church is more older people, so it's something that affects the younger generation more. So I don't think that's something that is like at the forefront of their minds right now.
And do you think if your church was talking about it, do you think that would mean that young people felt more welcome to join your church? Do you think it's a barrier that your church isn't talking about it?
I'm not sure on that one, because I'm not sure necessarily that a church talking about climate change is necessarily going to mean that someone's going to want to join it in that sense. However, I do think that it certainly could contribute to it. And yeah, I also do think that the church could definitely do more in that regard, but at the same time, it's more down to like the people higher up in terms of those running multinational companies to change their practices, because that's going to make the biggest difference for climate change.
Thank you. That was helpful. Thank you. I don't think we've mentioned yet, but if anyone in the audience would like to send through some questions, please do. We are listening. We're ready and waiting for some questions. Send through some difficult ones and some easy ones, and I'm sure our panel would love to answer them. Elisa, do you want to ask a question?
Unmute myself. Welcome, Dion. Good to see you. Thanks for being able to join us. I know it was a little bit tricky, but I'm going to bring you in. So we've been talking about some of the pressures in society, a lot of the big issues, climate emergency, COVID-19, racism, asylum crisis, all this kind of stuff, the pressures facing young people today, and just how we've been processing the last year. And I'm going to put this to you and then to someone else soon. But how is your faith speaking into all of this? How does your faith, is it helping you to cope what you believe with all of these kind of big issues? Is there any part of your Christianity, your Christian upbringing, or your faith that is kind of speaking into how you're navigating through all these difficulties in society?
Thank you, Elisa, and hi everybody. Apologies for my delay in arrival. Some interesting discussions. I think that's a great conversation question. Well, I think what has been highlighted for me and has been a challenge of my faith, but has also been something that has pushed me to where I am now, which is part of the diaconate at my church, which is still all very weird and new to me. But one thing that has been at the forefront of our conversation is people's humanity and dealing with the people that we have in front of us, and dealing with not just the church members that are now able to come back to church, but those who have really struggled during lockdown for various reasons. And getting to know people in your church, like getting to know people in your team. Like, for example, the Sunday school team, there's 3 of us, myself included. And it's only because of lockdown that we've actually got to speak and get to know each other, like in a deep way. We've cried together, we've prayed together, we've been honest and real with each other. We've had disagreements with each other and we've come back in love. Like those things are so important to anything, to building a church, which is not the building, it's actually the people. And it's crazy to me that it took a pandemic for us to actually acknowledge our neighbor in a real way. It's not just on a Sunday when you meet them and you say hi and bye, and you don't actually tell people how you are, because one, you don't have time, and two, you don't want people to know your business, because church people can be a lot, church politics can be a lot. But it's allowed people to just be real and to be themselves. And I think that's allowed a greater compassion. It's allowed people to understand grace a lot more. And so I think with people being more real and being themselves and not feeling the pressure to look good or to be perfect, or to put on a facade, because we're all kind of struggling. And the more you treat people as people and you don't put them on a pedestal because they're a Christian or they've been serving for how many years, XYZ, the more that you get the best out of them, and they can be of more value, I guess, in the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered the question. I feel like I went off on a tangent, so apologies if I did.
No, it's fine. I would like to also throw this question to Mark and then to Natasha, if possible. So the question is, how is your faith speaking into the way that you're navigating some of these huge issues? You can pick any or all of them, but just a little bit of an insight into how your kind of faith, your understanding of the Bible or your Christianity, what you believe is helping you or challenging you in all of these pressures.
Can I just add one more last thing, sorry, before you continue? I think it was Mark next. I think just to summarize what I said and to actually answer your question with my faith, I think the scripture that says come as you are is just come alive to me in this time. So that's kind of been the thing that has kept me.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I say with my faith, I think it also gives me like a duty that I have to talk about these things and speak up about these things. I don't think as a Christian, you have to talk about these things. And yeah, whenever you see injustice, it's something that you have to talk about, really. And especially as going back to climate emergency, the fact that like we're meant to be seen as stewards of the earth. So I really think that it's something that every Christian really has to grapple with. Yeah, and try and really make a change.
Thank you. And Natasha?
I would say probably the most important thing just on this journey is like having your own relationship with God and always having your own relationship with him, because I feel like, you know, there's over just the past year, you've seen a lot of people who call themselves Christians who are, you know, very much against like equality, you know, equal rights. And I'm saying, and I would just be like, if you believe yourself to be a child of God and God sent Jesus to die for all of our sins, then it's not up to you who gets forgiveness. That's not to do with you. If you're living your life to the fullest in a way that you believe is following God, then that's the only thing that you can do. You can share his word, you can, you know, share his love, but you cannot tell another person how to be. And like Dion said earlier about loving your neighbor, like you have to love them for them. You can't change the person that they are to be someone that you deem as acceptable, because what is acceptable under the eyes of God? He's going to accept us all. You know, that is between the individual and God to have that, you know, conversation or to have that relationship. And I feel like for me, I've very much been on a spiritual journey and kind of just realizing like, what gifts did God give me that I can use? And I have a voice, and, you know, people look to me for guidance. So if I can do that is, you know, covering as much and being as equal as humanly possible, then I'm going to do that, because that's what, you know, has come out of my relationship with God. And people need to, you know, really sit down and think about what they actually doing for God, or is it to, you know, fulfill their own sort of, you know, agenda. I think a lot of people like to do things for themselves and put another name on it, so it's not like, oh, it's not really coming from me, it's coming from God. But no, God didn't tell you to do that. You know, he said, you know, 10 commandments, love thy neighbor. He never said, you know, change this person because they're doing something that I believe is a sin or you believe is a sin. That's not up to you. And I feel like that might be very much, you know, the older generations in the church, which is why younger people might not feel as comfortable to be in those spaces, because they feel like, well, if this person thinks I'm sinning, everybody's going to think that I'm sinning, and having, you know, that kind of worry. And you shouldn't be worried going into church. You shouldn't be worried walking through those doors and thinking that everybody in there is going to judge you, because that is the place where judgment lives. That is a place where you are supposed to feel safe. And I feel like if there is not a safety aspect of the church or of, you know, Christianity in general, we're never going to be able to reach those other people because they won't feel safe. So like I was saying earlier, it's very much like I would never, like, I haven't been to church for a long time, and that's not because I don't feel comfortable in my faith. It's just because I feel like the church's values do not align with my values at this point in time, but I still have my relationship with God. I'm still open to talking about God. I still follow, you know, I have faith. And I think once we kind of allow people to follow faith in their own way, it's going to open up so much more. Like, imagine all the people that, you know, could bring so many good things into the church that feel like they're not allowed to be there because of, you know, certain aspects of their lives that we are not supposed to judge anyway. So I think if there's a, you know, general push for acceptance, and that's only going to come when everybody else, I think the church is going to be the best way for things to tumble outwards, because that's what everybody claims their faith is. They say, I believe in God. And if it is shown that the people that believe in God also believe in, you know, equality and sharing and wanting to live a fruitful life on a planet that we all live on, that we would all like to inhabit, then, you know, it needs to kind of start from the top down and not the bottom up. But yeah, I think it's been a very, like, I've had like so many kind of like, wow, oh my God moments, like, you know, being in that position last year. I think that was something that was divinely constructed by God to show me that I have these abilities to do these things. And now I'm being invited to share my voice even more. And it's like, if I didn't believe in that, would I be in this place? Would any of us be in that place if we didn't have that belief that there was something, a higher power guiding us, something? We've all been guided together. So I think it's just thinking about it like that. We're all being guided onto the same path, and we all have to accept that people would have come from everywhere and done everything. But if we have the one thing in common, that is faith, then it shouldn't matter. Yeah, so that was really long.
No, it's fine. Most thank you. So we are getting some questions in, which is wicked. So I'm actually going to jump. We've got one that I'm going to keep for later from Debbie, but just in response to what Natasha was saying, I'd like to ask Hannah if you have any ideas. So B-Joy Powell says, how do we cultivate a safe space within a church? Any ideas?
There's an analogy that I've always found quite helpful, and it's sort of the table analogy of having people so they feel like they belong around the table, not just to be participants and sort of be like, you imagine eating a meal, but actually really enjoying the conversation, joining in, and getting to that place of safety is really challenging. It takes a huge amount of intentionality. It takes intentionality in listening, intentionality in encouraging, in finding out about, you know, different things about people. So I think the church really needs to be very intentional with getting to know who's there, you know, who are we talking to, who is in our community, what do you do, rather than it just being, you know, there are people in my church who know me by name, who come up to be like, how are you doing with this? I may not know tons about them, but each week they remember my name. And actually, I'm in a congregation with hundreds of people. That feels really special to me, and that makes me feel safe. I know that's a very small thing, but it's intentional. It's intentional with getting to know people. Safe space maybe in terms of discussions. I think quite often when we discuss some quite big topics, it can get quite quickly a bit political. I know that church politics is really challenging, and actually I know as a young person I sometimes feel a bit scared is the wrong word, but ill-equipped. And actually that's not what God's saying. God's saying that he, you know, he calls the ill-equipped. He equips us in those moments. We don't need to have 20 years of experience of working in this area in order to speak on this thing. If he's given us like a download of what he wants us to be talking about, then great. Like, why not us share it? You know, I am not the most educated person on some of the things that I'm involved with, you know, running an anti-racism education hub. Like, I do not know as much as maybe some people in the world know about that kind of stuff, but no one was doing anything. And so I decided to do something about it. And I'd rather be, you know, you'd rather do that kind of stuff. So I think it's having an environment that is encouraging, but also has that challenge, because that a safe place isn't just like an easy, comfortable space. Safety needs to come with some challenge. It just needs to have that high support, high challenge model. So all to say, I think that boils down to intentionality. Like, have people of different generations over for dinner, get to know them, hear what they're saying, so that when it comes to those discussions, it's not just strangers that you sit next to on a Sunday in a room together. It's people who are a family, and actually seeing, like, what does that mean? What does the Bible tell us about the family of God? That's not just people who are there. That is the fact that you know Christine over there and what she does, and you've helped her out that one time because she needed something when she was moving. Like, it's actually knowing the people, because when you have those conversations and it starts kicking off a bit, you can sit back and go, hey, look, like, we all love each other. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect right now, because that isn't what it looks like, but at least it feels safe.
Can I also just say something there? I really liked Hannah's response. And one thing that I think with safe spaces is that if you are one of the people who's not feeling safe or not feeling heard within your community, then that means that there's a demand for more safety, and there's a demand for room to on these issues that you're passionate about. And I think one great solution to that is to create that safe space yourself. So if you feel neglected and you feel unheard, then it's very likely that there's other people around you who feel the same as you. So it's good for you to align together. And I think often we look for churches to make themselves safe and become the safe space, whereas we can become the safe space ourselves. And very often, once we create that spaces, I think that's how change actually becomes. Because once you create your notable safe space, and once you start gaining recognition for the fact that you've done something independently, other people straight away want to become involved. And that's actually how politics works, is when, you know, leaders see small decisions and small feelings that are gaining popularity with people, that they then, you know, adopt to make sure that more people can come on board. So I think that's a great initiative to create safe spaces for yourself and for those around you, and see that just snowball into something bigger.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much to think about here. Laura, I'll hand over to you for the next couple of questions.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I found that really useful. I think I should have been taking notes, but I know I can watch back later, so that's good. Excellent. So a question, let's send this over to, who should we send this over to? Dion Murray. So young people are often accused of being fickle, like care too much about what's on Instagram and or what other social media platforms there are, and influencers, and you know, all these things online, and maybe aren't taken seriously. How can we change that? How are you changing that so that people understand that young people have an important voice to share? How can you change that?
I think it comes down to creating what we've just spoken about, creating safe spaces, but also creating opportunities. And I guess just to go along with what Gabriel said, we could suggest those opportunities, we could put ourselves forward for it. But there's also that thing of when you're kind of tarnished with a brush for so long, you kind of don't want to, or you just think, oh, nobody's going to listen to me anyway, or they're going to shut down my idea, etc., etc. So it's harder to go that route. So yeah, just creating opportunities and spaces for young people to have their say, have their voice, you know, because essentially it's just what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say assumption. It's not quite the right word, but it's not a known a fact that young people, all they do is, you know, be on Instagram all day, every day, and that they're fickle. It's just this worldview, like so many other things, you know. It's like saying that older people in the church are forever stuck in their ways and they're never going to change. The pandemic happened, and I think by force for a lot of them, they had to change, but the change happened. So whether that opportunity was given or forced, it happened, and then the change was made. So I feel like we're in a stage now where we need to be more vocal that we want those changes, and hopefully the people, the leaders, the elder generation are understanding that they need to allow us, they need to step back and let us step forward, essentially, to have our say, and then they will realize that we have a lot of important things to say. And also, I think there's this idea, I don't know where it's come from, that young people are very combative in a sense of like, we just want to argue everything if we disagree with it, but that's not quite true. We just want to have conversations. We actually want to learn and be like, okay, I understand your view, however, this is my view. And like, that's the best way to learn. It's not just about saying, okay, well, I don't agree with you, because then where do we go from there? And I think that's unfortunately the view, that's how young people are, like that we just want to argue all the time rather than listen and understand. And that's where change happens. That's where we can have decent conversations. So yeah, opportunities.
And do you feel like your church gives you those opportunities, and the young people in your church those opportunities to speak?
My church, personally, yes. But it's taken time in some ways. For example, I am still a bit like in shock that I'm part of the diaconate team, because it's not been that way for years, as in the demographic has been the same for years. It hasn't changed in terms of kind of middle-aged, elderly, and a lot of them served for a long time. So I don't know about other churches, but they had lifetime deacons, and then that changed as well. So they serve a shorter time, so you can kind of get a change and whatever. But then you have the same thing where people are voting in the same kind of person, the same demographic, without thinking, okay, something needs to change. So I feel very blessed to be in the position that I'm in now. But then that's taken 26 years. Like I've been in the church since I was really young. So there's other opportunities though, like to preach or to share. You know, we have obviously our Sunday school do their service, we have prize giving, things like that. So there are opportunities, and they are very encouraging. For example, we have a couple young people who do the drums on a Sunday sometimes. Like one of them is football, and he's been encouraged as well. We've supported with that. But I think in terms of leadership, that's where we need to really push. That's where we really need to focus. And it starts with looking at young people as like God has already gifted them to lead. And to do that, we can't just be looking at them with worldly eyes or eyes that just sees them on their phone all the time. That's not going to work. Like we have to really look at them like God made them for a purpose. What is it? If I can't see it right now, then let's have a conversation. Let's try and figure out with them what their purpose is, what is their skills and their talents, where God is trying to use them, and how can I use that to help bless the kingdom of God overall.
That's really helpful. And that's going back to Hannah's point about building relationships between different generations and getting to know people in your church, so that the older generations know that the young people have a really important thing to say, and we start to understand each other better. So thank you for that. Great. So we've answered that already. Let me find another question. So this is across to Mark Anthony. What were your dreams and aspirations in terms of your studies and career, and who's helped you to realise them?
I think I've always had like quite a set path in terms of like wanting to do well in school and then going to uni and then sort of starting a career. So with that, obviously my parents just helping me in terms of like setting a foundation, and then teachers, and then also friends, because like surrounding yourself with like-minded people that can push you to do better really helped me. So being in that environment where I had people pushing me was like really important, both at school and at uni. And yes, and then now obviously wanting to start a career in law is sort of the next step for me. And yeah, having a mentor and just other people that I can, you know, ask, because I've got friends in law that I can ask about this company, or about how was their life as like a trainee solicitor. That's something that can help me to get to the next stage in my career.
Great, thank you for that. Elisa, would you like to, can I hand over to you?
Yeah, of course you can. So we've got a few questions here, and they all kind of a little bit similar. So the questions that we had lined up were why a lot of young people are leaving the church. What do you think? Why do you think that is? And why do you continue to attend? But tagged on to that as well as some questions from the audience, of which we're willing to take some more, by the way. And Debbie, I haven't forgotten you at all. But just in line with these questions, and Debbie's, what would an inclusive church look like for young people? And how do you suggest that maybe a church that doesn't have any young people, how would they go about making them feel welcome? So these are all conversations about how can churches, how can they become maybe more appealing to church? Is that even the right word? Why are young people leaving? Where do you think churches are going wrong? You can answer, I'm going to give this to every single panelist, and you can answer anything of this ilk. We're looking at why people are leaving the church, where churches are struggling to have young people join or stay in their church. What are your ideas about where the church is going wrong, and solutions? So I'll start with Gabriel.
Yeah, so I do think this is an interesting topic, because I don't know. So for me, when I was younger, I did realize that, you know, a lot of the kids who are around the age I am now were leaving, but I also realized that they weren't leaving outside of the church, as, you know, the church with a capital C, the global church. They were leaving just to go to other churches that catered more to what they wanted. So I think that, you know, if young people have a relationship with God, they'll always want to maintain that. If it's healthy, sometimes they might struggle with it, but they'll try to maintain it, and then they'll just go to somewhere where they're able to maintain it in a way that caters to their form of expression. So I think the key there is making sure that the church and the leadership cater to the forms of expression of the young people there. So it might be worship. I think that's one big problem for a lot of young people. They don't like the hymns. Making sure that the worship songs could be, you know, to their needs, essentially, but also it could be the issues that are spoken about in church. So a lot of young people have needs that are related to relationships, like Hannah said earlier. It might be that they're getting involved into some stuff out of church. It might be that they have certain problems, but the church doesn't speak about that. And every time there's sermons, it will only speak about certain topics that have nothing to do with their lives. So then they'll have to leave, because they do need guidance. And everyone, even adults, want guidance. So if they're not getting it from church, they will try to make sure that they can get it from somewhere. So catering to their forms of expression in different ways, so that's the issues that they're passionate about and their forms of expression, and also giving them space. And I've already said, you know, if you're not getting that safe space, create that for yourself in your church. But if the church does have the possibility to create that space, because sometimes people are not always confident to create themselves, then the church does need to make sure that they can, you know, give them room. If you have a room for the church, in the church, for people to have different activities, then put it to good use and make sure that you can put young people there, allow them to have activities. If you have budget for different church groups to have activities, make sure your young people have a budget to go to events, to organize things for themselves, and make sure you're playing a role in their own growth and stimulation. So yeah, I think that's a safe space in my view.
Thank you, Gabriel. And just to remind everybody that's watching, this is being recorded. You will be able to watch this again and kind of go through and comb through with a fine comb all the important information and insights here. I'm going to move over to Natasha about your ideas. Why are young people leaving the church? Where are the church going wrong? And any ideas about solutions on this point?
Like, I completely agree with Gabriel, by the way. I feel like everybody's kind of pretty much saying the same thing, but I also think church politics is a massive part of why young people leave, because once you get to the age, like once you understand the stuff that's going on, you kind of don't want to be in that energy, especially if you're focusing on having a relationship with God, because a lot of the church politics is nothing to do with God. It's a lot to do with, you know, the things that they would, you know, say was bad to us about gossiping, and like, you don't know where that church money's getting put, that fund that you give in every week, what is that being shown? Especially saying, if we don't have a safe space, why am I paying this money every week to do something that is not, you know, being given back into the community? And I think there's a lot of, you know, content that's like based around sin. And if you make someone feel like a sinner, as soon as they're there, they're not going to want to stay. And I think when young people are growing up, when everybody's growing up, you know, you experience a lot of different things that could be conceived as sin, but we're all sinners. You know, it's going to happen. Nothing that we do is perfect. And I think there is such, you know, an element of like perfection, like being in the church and like, you know, having to be perfect at all times. And I think once a lot of young people don't feel perfect all the time and don't feel like, you know, they're always going in the right way, so the church is the place to help them get on that path. And I feel like if you're constantly, you know, attacking people or undermining people, making them feel like, you know, there's something that is making them want to leave or want to be pushed out, then you're gonna see, you know, high numbers of young people leaving. So I definitely think, you know, younger, even like pastors or people talking at church services is gonna make young people feel a lot more included, because you're watching someone who is your age, who's also going through the same things as you, also navigate their you know, their relationship with Christianity. I think having different people of faith speaking and being able to speak will help people a lot, and just kind of realize, oh my God, this person's kind of, you know, been in a similar position to me. How can I help? How have they used faith to move forward? How can I use faith to move forward? And I think a lot of that is kind of missing in the church. I think it's very much, I don't want to compare it to Old Testament, but like it's very much like, you know, the system of the church has worked for this long and it's happened for this long, so people just think that that's the checklist, but obviously something's not working. And I think there is a disconnect between young people and having faith, because they feel like they're sinners and they feel like they're being pushed out and they feel like they're not allowed to do any wrong. And when you feel like you're not allowed to do any wrong, then you're not going to want to be in that relationship. It's like a toxic relationship. You feel like you're doing something bad all the time and you're getting gaslit all the time because you don't understand and you don't think that that's normal to, you know, have your own journey with faith. And I think if there was more of that, more reassurance that like, if you stray off this path, it doesn't mean that you are straying. It just means that you are finding your own way, you know, to get to the end result. And the end result is we all want to be in heaven and we all want to have, you know, a relationship with God. And I think that is the most important thing. I've said it like 50 times, but like literally your personal relationship with God, like that is what people need to understand. Like it's not going to look the same for everyone. It's never going to look the same. We're all different people. We all experience different things. And if we can, you know, all feel that we have that relationship, then younger people are going to be attracted to that. They want security. They want to feel safe. They want to know that there's somewhere that they can go where they're not being judged at all angles, because society's doing that enough to us anyway. So we need a place where we're going to be able to go where all of that disintegrates. And I feel like the church is not necessarily the place where that happens right now. I'm not saying that it couldn't be. I think if everybody wanted it to be that place, it could 100% be that place. But like Gabriel and Dion have said, like, we have to actively be doing that ourselves as well, because if we wait for people to feel comfortable, then we're going to be waiting forever. So we have to try and push it as much as possible that, you know, young people are driving, because they're going to be the ones that, you know, uplift the church when all the older people aren't here anymore. Who's going to go to church? Like, if no one's here, no one's gonna go. So yeah, I think that's definitely like an important aspect as well. I keep talking for ages, I'm so sorry.
Fine. And so for Hannah and for Mark, as I move this question on, does the church invest in young people? What can this investment look like? And do you think there's a bias of this investment for those who want to have church-based ministries as opposed to others that are just kind of doing either parachurch or just out there living, pursuing other ventures? You know, do you think churches invest more in those who want to stay with us? What about the young people who are doing other things as well? So what does this investment look like? Are they investing enough in young people? And do you think there's a bias about those who stay, cling, or work for the church, and those who pursue outside ventures? Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, I think just slightly touching on, I think it links in, but I'm almost thinking, you know, to invest in the church, we obviously need to get people into the church. And I think massive issue is it not feeling relevant today. You know, we've got, I think about some of my friends who aren't Christian. They are really passionate about the same things that I'm passionate about, but it just looks a bit different. So I'm really passionate about the climate emergency, climate change. And so is my great friend, Robbie. He's a member of Extinction Rebellion. He is really passionate about it. Our kind of the root of why we're passionate about it is a bit different. I'm passionate about it because I have my faith and I feel like, you know, I'm passionate about it. It's the right thing to do. He's passionate about it because it's the right thing to do. And he would be more interested in coming into the church if he could see the church leading in these issues, leading the change. And actually, I think the fact that we're not being, because we can't even get young people in the doors because it doesn't feel relevant anymore. You know, there's something called Clarkson's Farm. I don't know whether people ever saw it, but Jeremy Clarkson's series on Amazon Prime. And there's this funny moment where he's kind of like in a pond and he jokes like, I am like Moses, with like sitting in the water and stuff. But this like young guy next to him is like, who's Moses? People don't even know biblical stories anymore because it's not a cultural thing to go to church. So I think our issue is, yeah, we definitely want to be investing in young people, but first we've got to tackle getting them in. But I think when we get them in order to invest in people, in order to be inclusive, to raise up young leaders, it's all about empowering them. I don't think that means we need to necessarily, you know, never let someone of a different generation speak. I think we've got a lot of opportunity to learn from people. I would love for there to, you know, I think we've mentioned mentoring quite a lot here, but I would absolutely love to be mentored by someone in the church. Sometimes it feels a bit awkward as the young person to go and ask that person. I need to get over myself and go and ask someone. But also it'd be really nice if someone approached me, or I was chatting about it with some of my friends who actually, some of them would be such gifted preachers and would deliver amazing sermons. One of my friends, a teacher, like she literally does this for a living. She is a natural talking in front of people, but actually she is not being empowered or invested in order to do that. And actually it's very challenging if you're not in a position of responsibility, if you're not in those circles that are making those decisions. It's a big thing to then be like, would I be able to do something? Whereas if there's a welcoming space of, hey, look, if you're interested in preaching on a Sunday, if you're interested in leading in this thing, please come up to us. Because I think too often it just gets decided behind closed doors and you never have a bit of a say in it. Like even right now, our church is about to lead Alpha. I said I was interested in joining the Alpha team. I didn't get to pick my role. They just decided that I would be a table host and that someone else would be a helper. But what if that helper had really wanted to have been a table host, but you're never allowing them to be that? I just think it looks like asking people, what would you like to have investment in? And then let's work that out together rather than presuming what investment looks like and then selecting those people yourselves. Because actually people who want to preach may not be the ones that are the extroverts that are staying till the end of church to have all the fun. They could be people that they look completely different to that, but they just may not be quite as seen.
Thank you. And Mark, what can investing in young people look like?
I think it's really important to give young people the space to sort of be creative and bring new ideas to the church, because I think a lot of it is older people doing things that they think will be good for younger people rather than younger people actually making the decisions. So I think that's really important. Kind of going back onto the original question about why people aren't going to church, and this is going to sound quite harsh, but it really just boils down, a lot of it boils down to the fact that people find it quite boring, to be honest. You go to church, you listen to the same 5 to 10 hymns week in, week out, and then you listen to the pastor preach a sermon that's not too dissimilar to something that you've heard before for about half an hour. And then you go home and then you rinse, repeat the following Sunday. So I think there really needs to be more creativity in the way things are done. I don't mean to change the whole thing, but I don't mean to change, completely revolutionize the way church is done, but there needs to be more creativity with it.
Thank you. Laura.
Thank you so much. I really am learning so much, and someone sent in a comment saying, I need to be able to listen to this back again, and just repeating what Elisa said, it will be available to listen back to again, so don't worry if you haven't got your notepad there writing down notes. Excellent. So questions that come in, I think we've answered the one about inclusive church, about safe space. Yeah. Oh yes, we've done all of those. That's great. Let's head into. Oh, Elisa, do you know what? Oh, there was a question here. Do you believe in voting, and does it make a difference? That's quite a big question. Does anyone from the panel?
Would like to go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I do like this. I study politics, so I think this is a great question. So I think there are three. Okay, so I'll tell you my initial response to that is yes. I do believe that voting does make a change, but I do believe that there's a caveat in that, and I believe that for a lot of people, especially marginalized groups, we're often reduced to our identities, and therefore we just vote for groups based on who we are. And that, I'm not saying that you have to vote for the other side just because you're expected to, but I do believe a lot of the parties and a lot of the leaders that we vote for often take our voices because they'll know that we'll vote for them regardless, and they don't actually change policies, they don't actually make policies that are directed at helping us, and therefore they just continue to operate the same always, ignoring our real concern, whilst continuing to succeed. But I think that we should think about not abstaining from voting, but not voting until your voices are heard. And I don't believe that you should just vote for any party because you believe that that party is automatically the party for change, but actually listen to your leaders, listen to what they have to say before you start voting. And I think that makes it more effective. So I think the best example of this, there's a few examples actually, but the 2015 general election, the Green Party had 1 million votes during that election. They didn't get a single seat, I don't think, because of the way the first past the post system works. But because of those 1 million votes that they got, all the other parties in the subsequent elections started to adopt green policies and started to now talk about the environment, which they were not doing about prior. So during all the elections after that, they're all talking about we're going to plant thousands of trees, etc., because of the popularity of the Green Party. And it's also the same with the 2019 election. A lot of the groups in the north and a lot of working class areas who had been previously disregarded outside of London, before that they weren't really included, but seeing as those are the parties that had really changed Brexit, those were the parties who had been really marketed towards, and those are the parts of the country that politicians are really trying to listen to, and they still are now because of the way that they had the effect. So yeah, to answer that question once again, I do believe that voting makes a change, but I don't believe you should just vote for this. Actually, listen to your leaders, and if they don't sound like they're actually listening to your needs, then don't vote for them until they're really listening.
Thank you, Gabriel. That was really helpful. Does anyone else on the panel want to jump in? Oh, Natasha, go ahead, please.
I completely agree with Gabriel, but I'm also kind of speaking from a point as where I don't believe that like the two-party system works, and I don't believe that voting works in this country. It's not a democracy. We don't live in a democracy. We live pretty much, you know, in a police state, almost like a dictatorship. We're probably going to see the Tory party for the next however many years, unless we, you know, can come together and do something. So I think it's kind of more than voting. It's actually deciding what we as people want to see from the government. And I think once we as people understand what we want to see from the government, then they will have to change. But if we continue to allow, oh, it's just voting, oh, it's just this, it's just that, it's two sides of the same coin. And until we are able to get those two sides to differentiate, voting's not really going to change anything. So I think, again, having a sense of community, having a sense of, you know, your fellow human being, your fellow person who lives in this country, what is going to be the best option, not just for you as a person, but for everyone. And I think there's a serious kind of like empathy lacking in this country. There's a serious misunderstanding of, you know, it's kind of like dog eat dog, I guess, like this country, that's kind of like what it's based on. And I think until we are able to re-get ourselves in a community again, it's going to be very difficult to be able to vote out things that aren't, you know, benefiting us, because no one's really having the conversation, okay, what is good for all people? It's kind of like, what is good for me, and what's good for me must be good for everybody else. And I think until we figure that out, just like questions and stuff about voting, like, it don't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you abstain on voting. If you vote, it doesn't matter, because we're going to continually be closing the same cycles unless we as people realize that we have more power than the government. They work for us, we don't work for them. So they should be serving our highest goods instead of us serving their higher good, which would be to pay loads of tax and, you know, go to work and all this kind of stuff. When, you know, like we were talking about earlier, we can't buy houses. So our generation can't buy houses, and we're not going to be able to buy houses by voting. We have to stabilize as, you know, a community and think, how are we going to get fair treatment? So I think voting is very much like a surface level thing to think about, like, oh, it's just voting, but like all the stuff underneath that is way before you get to voting. It's like thinking about fundamentally what you actually want from a political party. Do you even want a political party? Like, all those kind of things, all those conversations are ones that we definitely need to have, and those conversations all do need to also be had in the church, because the church can be seen as very conservative, but what is conservatism actually doing for marginalized people who are the ones who are mainly going to church, so Black and brown people, being in that community and being in that space? Yeah.
Thank you. Would anyone else on the panel like to answer this question?
Just a little bit. I think for me, something that, and this links into sort of maybe my approach to different things, is that thinking about, say, climate change, at the end of the day, my choice to pick the broccoli without the plastic on to the broccoli with the plastic on isn't going to save the planet, but it's my little step towards it. And I think, though, so many, you know, relating that to voting, so many areas in the UK will stay the same political party. They will stay red, they will stay blue. I know that, but I think for me, my opinion would be that I would rather get my voice in there. I'd rather get my vote out there, as long as I've read up about it. I hold my hands up. Night before the mayor elections, I was sat there like, oh dear, there's this big thing tomorrow. Where's that little leaflet that came through the door quite a few weeks ago that had all the little names in it? Like, I don't want to vote just for the sake of voting. I don't want to walk up to that ballot and just go, well, you know what, I'm just going to do that and that and that. I would, you know, I want to read up about it. But I think that comes from a place for me of people died to win my vote. And I want to be able to use that, but only if I'm educated on what I'm voting on, only if I know what I'm going to say and vote with. Because I think actually it almost stems back to school. If I think about PSHE or whatever we might have done, and you know, that like the weird class you might have in the week where there was no real purpose for it, but maybe they touched on something. like, why was there nothing really on voting in that? Because I sat down to see the mayoral elections for the first time in my life, and I didn't really know what it was. You got the London Assembly as well, and like all these different things. I know it's on me to look things up. I'm an adult, I can research, but also I feel like there are points where almost it would be helpful to cover some of those things of like, if you vote, what does it mean? That kind of stuff, so that when you get into the big wide world, there's almost, you have a little bit more help in that direction. Because actually I think of my brother, the times when he's voted, he's either like, oh, he just like ran up to one and just picked the first one on there, and I was like, oh, okay, great, and cool, but you know, it didn't change the vote in that area. But he had no idea what to do. He just thought, I'm just going to vote, I'm just going to go for it, and then didn't vote the next time. But he wasn't really thinking about it at all. So I don't necessarily, vote if you want to vote, don't vote if you don't want to vote, but I'd rather people be educated in their reason for why they're doing what they're doing, and actually engaging with the topic. Like, why are you not? Okay, great. Like, I completely respect your opinion. Why do you choose to vote? Great, I respect your opinion, but at least like coming to a decision on it, rather than it just being like, election rolls in, election rolls out, I've not really considered it, and it's done.
Thank you.
Sorry. I know I did speak already, just want to say briefly. I also think political organization locally is really important. Just always remember that, your local politicians have more power over some of the issues that relate to you, more so than the mayor or even the prime minister. So think about voting regionally and in your local council, because you can make a difference there more immediately than through national elections.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to, I've got a question that I want to ask personally. Obviously, Synergy Network is working to end serious youth violence, and I think that Dion Marie is going to be able to answer this question for me about serious youth violence. What do you think we can do to address the issue, and also how can we improve relationships between the police and young people?
This response is, thank you for asking, is literally mainly coming out of an experience I had recently where I had to step in as an appropriate adult, having no idea what an appropriate adult was. So in a nutshell, it's kind of to represent a young person who's been arrested. I was given information from my manager, who's also my mentor, Ami Bahari, who is a CEO and founder of the Hebe Foundation, and she gave me a little brief WhatsApp message and I made my way to the station, and the rest was more or less me learning on the job, even though she was on the other side. So I was constantly WhatsApping her. I had to call her a couple of times to clarify certain things, get her opinion, because I didn't want to make the wrong decision. And since she had been the appropriate adult for this young person probably about 3 times before me, even though I knew the young person, I just wanted to make sure anything I said or did was in alignment of what she would have done if she was physically present. And I learned so much in that probably 8 hours that I was at the police station, about what it really is to support a young person and be present. Like, the word present, I'm going to emphasize, because when it comes to youth violence, I mean, there's so many reasons why things happen. Young people get involved in things, their families get involved in things, etc., etc. And it comes down to them not feeling safe a lot of the time, not feeling like anybody actually cares about them, because they genuinely believe that the system, the police, the lawyers, whoever is against them and wants them to end up in the worst position. And there were so many times I was even getting frustrated with the solicitor, and I actually had to put in a complaint, because it was just so clear to me that their concern was not about this young person. It was about what's quickest, easiest for them. Obviously, they know the law. They know how they can go route A instead of B, C, D, because B, C, D might be longer or take up their time or take up brain space, etc., etc. And I had to remind myself that my role was to make sure that that young person's voice was heard, that their feelings mattered, that if this was going to take 8 hours, it's going to take 8 hours, and I'm not going to go anywhere until I know what the final decision is. And I know it can be quite scary or intimidating maybe for some people to get that close to a young person in a situation, because they may be fearful that they're going to get hurt, or, you know, they might then get involved in something they didn't want to get involved in. But if you genuinely present yourself as, I'm not here to judge you, I'm not here to judge your decision or wherever it is caused you to be in this place, I'm just here to support you as a person, outside of the violence, outside of whatever it is you've got going on, outside of what's going on in the streets, going on at home. Like, I actually care about you. Like, I actually think your life matters. I might not know why, but I actually do. Once you give that reassurance to any young person, it all starts to make sense, and the change can be made. Obviously, it has to come from them, but they just want to know someone's on their side. And it's not, I'm not saying on their side, I'm not saying condemn their behavior. I'm not saying telling them that, you know, you was right to do this because you felt like you was done wrong. You might feel that way, but if you've done something wrong, own it, take accountability, but also know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm going to walk with you or sit with you or represent you or be on the line or wherever it is, whatever that looks like, whatever that journey looks like. And I think it again goes back to what I said. We have all of these preconceived notions of what it is a young person is, or a criminal, or somebody involved in youth violence. Like, I understand watching the news and the amount of people that have been stabbed, killed, that it makes no sense and it breaks my heart. And I just, you know, I wish I could stop it, right? And in that moment, I don't want to jump to the person who committed the murder or whatever. Like, that's not exactly where my brain goes. However, if I got a phone call to do it, I would, because there's so much more to it. So much more. There's so much more than that label, or like Natasha said, we are so much more than the sin that everybody can see. Because I feel like once you take those glasses off and you see past the sin or whatever it is, that's when you can really see the way that God sees people. And I believe that that's what we all want at the end of the day, because if we want God to see us without blemish and all of them things, then we need to also try our hardest to see other people in that way also.
I just wanted to,
sorry, go ahead, please.
Just not adding really nothing new to what you just said, Leon, but I think the power of encouragement. You know, I work with young people who are in gangs or have been in gangs or can't be in certain areas of London because of gang violence and gang threat. But when you get to sit down with someone, look eye to eye with them and say that you are loved, maybe not necessarily in that language all the time, because you know, sometimes that might seem a bit extreme to a young person you've just met, but sitting down with someone and asking the Holy Spirit, fill my mouth right now, what is it that they need to hear? What is something that has been spoken over them time and time again? You know, why, sitting down with someone and thinking, why are you in a gang right now? Why do you feel like this is the route that you're in? What's happened before that? What are the words of destruction that have been spoken over you? And what can I do in this moment? It might not correct them fully, but what can the Holy Spirit do through me to say, hey, look, you are seen. You are a child of God, and all I want to do is say that you are loved, because you see that. I've seen it with young people where they've never heard an encouragement before. They've grown up in homes where people have just spoken words of death and lies constantly over them. They think they are useless. They think they have no value, but they do have value when they're in a gang and they commit that crime, because, oh my gosh, they back me. I'm seen. I've got value. I'm known. I'm feared. Gosh, that gives me an identity. And actually, if your identity isn't being formed from encouragement, then that's really hard. And I've seen young people that have been absolutely transformed by just words of encouragement, who walk out that door after receiving it and they realize that something can change. And that's our position. Some of us might, you know, not know if someone's in a gang, but you know, it doesn't always have to be quite as extreme as someone who is in a gang. But I think taking it away and generally encouraging young people is massive. Encouragement in general, we need to hear it more, because actually when you receive an encouragement, it does feel great. But when I sit down and I get to encourage my young people and I see the change, that's what God's calling us to do.
Thank you, Hannah. That's really helpful. I think, yeah, one of the overarching messages that lots of you have said is about people being young people being acknowledged and given space to be valued and heard, and for us to be able to, well, this kind of idea of inclusive church, people being able to be welcomed and come as they are. I found that really helpful to hear that being repeated by lots of different people. So thank you. I'm going to head back over to Elisa.
Yep, so I think we're coming to an end. So this is going to be a quick fire question for all of you. You've got to do it really quickly. Give me your best 10, 15 seconds. Okay, I want to know from each of you your hopes for the future. Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? How are you hoping to contribute to society? And maybe a scripture you can paraphrase, don't preach, that inspires you for these next kind of 5 to 10 years. Give me your best 15 seconds. We'll start with Gabriel.
Yes, I'm not sure of a scripture to say, but in the future, I hope to work in communication, so making sure that companies and individuals are able to express their points of view and their needs effectively. And I'm also interested in mentorship and making sure that young people can get the help that they need to succeed in life.
Brilliant. Thank you, Natasha.
Hopefully I'll just be continuing to use my voice across multiple different platforms and, you know, trying to relay any messages that I feel are important. I think continuing to use my, you know, platform and my voice and, you know, just being one of God's messengers and like being able to share the word of not just God, but of faith and equality. So yeah, that's my dream life.
Well, it's such a deep question. I think I would like to have passed on some kind of faith legacy of purpose to others. I'm 26, but I've officially become an auntie, and like I have nephews and nieces, but like people start calling me auntie, and like if I had a goal in life, this sounds weird, that was my goal, that people would see me as the auntie that they can come and talk to, even if they don't know me like that, and they can gain some kind of wisdom and go out and do good in the world. And yeah, I'm on the right track, but yeah, I just want God to use me because I'll be about 30 in 5 years' time. So by then, if someone's taken on that faith legacy and they're doing great things and they can say because Auntie Dion told me, or Auntie Dion Marie, then I'll be blessed.
Cool. Hannah.
Yeah, I would love in 5 years' time to be well on my way, if not fully set up with that vision of the charity. I really believe in society. A lot of our issues, we don't treat the problem. We kind of put a plaster over something. We don't treat the wound. And I'm particularly passionate about human trafficking and modern slavery. So I would love to set up an organisation where I sit down with the perpetrators of what happens, so we can stop the cycle. We can stop it because sadly people can continue to get victimized, and that will continue unless you sit down with the perpetrator and love them the way that Jesus would love them and say, look, you have done this crime, and that looks like going into prison. So I love prison ministry, but sitting down with people and saying, hey, look, your identity is in Jesus, you've done this crime, but look what could happen, look how you can be redeemed. So I don't know where that will be, where in the world, who I'll be with, but I want to be more on the way to do that.
Thank you. And Mark.
Sorry about that. Yeah, in 5 years' time, I'm not sure where I'll be, but I'm hoping that whoever I do come into contact with, that they can see the light of God in me, and also that I can really sort of impact people just through talking to them, just people in my personal sphere, but also a wider sphere as well, like at work or wherever. Yeah, that's really something that I want to do.
Thanks so much. Obviously too much pressure there with the scripture, so I'm going to give everybody one. Philippians 1:6 says, be confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. And I'm going to hand over to Laura to wrap us up.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a brilliant evening. Thank you, everyone. And if you've enjoyed this evening, we will be doing more webinars in the future. And a quick way of being able to keep on top of that and find out when they're coming up is by following us on social media. So actually, I can't remember our tag quite this second. I'll be able to tell you. Wait 1 second. It's We Are Synergy Net. Or if you go on our website, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, and then you'll be getting your invitations through that. So thank you so much to all the panelists. We have loved hearing from you. Thank you, and be blessed. God bless. Thank you and good night.